Should be rolling. Everything is checked. So another horse in the Wexford training barn is Rafalko. So Rafalko is my other personal horse that I own along with Prima. And out of the almost 40 years that I've been a horse owner, I've only owned 8 horses. Rafalko is number 8. Prima's been there, oh my gosh, Prima was number 3 or 4. And so in that time, I don't sell my horses. It's a little bit unusual, I think, for horse trainers. A lot of horse trainers make their money by flipping horses, just like people flip houses. I like rehabbing, but I don't sell, because unless I find somebody that's going to continue the same work, which is a little hard to find, then they just become part of my family. The relationship I have with each horse is just as important to me as what I do with each horse. So Rafalko's mine for life. I've had him several years now. When I got him, he was over 10 years old. He had been shown, I think, to the level of pre-St. George in dressage. But by the age of 10, he was a free horse for me because he was lame on the right front with navicular changes, special shoes, and had ring bone on both front pasterns. So his progress has been slow to change because in all that time that he was ridden in the posture of extension, like I talked about with Prima, he performed at a high level doing athletic work with his back dropped, with his pelvis disengaged instead of engaged, and instead of his head and neck going up, which is the more natural version of that posture that Prima showed in the other video, this horse had learned to balance on the bit, and he over-curled his neck in what looked like roll cur, or basically curling his neck so severely that his nose was almost between his front legs. And so I work him on the ground in the halter because any rein resistance, rein aids, can still trigger that old neck use, which then causes sort of the whole thing just falls apart. It sort of triggers him back into the posture of extension, and it's very hard. So I ride him in a snaffle bit because the bit in Verdun, everything was worse. The snaffle bit, everything was better. But I've had to rehab Rafalko, completely altering his muscling, his coordination, everything he thought he knew about doing dressage maneuvers, without any pressure on the reins. So he's had to work on a loose rein. And the other thing that's caused it to take a fair amount of time, several years to get to this point, is if we went faster than a walk, if we did a little bit of work in trot and canter, he would very quickly start to go lame again. It used to be the right front leg pretty regularly, or the right front hoof, and then more recently, even if we trot and canter, if he does show any lameness, it's now on the left front, which I think we've cracked through some of the biggest patterns he came with, but there's still some residual crookedness where he's a little bit crooked through his left front leg, and if he loses his balance, then he's going to overload that left front leg and aggravate his ring bone, and then he comes up lame. I can keep working him, but I have to fall back to the walk, and I have to give him supported work. So showing the exact same long reins on a circle, long reins on a small circle that I did with Prima, this is the exercise I'm going to introduce all the horses with, because they can all do it, but there's various reasons or little tweaks depending on the horse's level of training that I can make within the same exercise. So it took quite a while Where Prima shortens the neck upward, Rafalko, with the same use of his back and disengaged hindquarters. So in other words, the spine going down in extension, the hindquarters rotating too far back, making the back and pelvis very laterally unstable. Instead of shortening his neck muscles and getting his head high, he shortened the neck muscles by severely over-curling his neck forward and down, right? And then he would chomp the bit, he would gape his mouth. He showed all kinds of signs of discomfort and struggle. So I really wasn't able to even use the long reins for a while. I had to do a lot of in-hand work and hand walking to get going, and riding. He always did a little better under saddle as long as I kept him on a very loose rein and in a snaffle bit without hardly touching the reins, and didn't do anything that even smelled like lateral work or dressage maneuvers. We had to go right back to just working straight on a circle, straight lines, squares, transitions when we could do them, or if he was lame, the only transitions we could do would be between walk and halt. So, and when I started with him, the other thing he could not do was slow down. Whether it was walk, trot, or canter, he would just go faster and faster and faster because he would lose his stability and control over his own movement. So he couldn't walk slow. So this very slow walk that he's maintaining today was sort of hard earned. He had to improve his engagement, he had to remuscle, he had to figure out how to use his back and hindquarters for stability during motion instead of his front legs, neck, and either the reins or the bit. So this is where we're at now. And when I work with Rafalko in this exercise, it's a little bit advanced version of what I was doing with Prima. And what I'm working on specifically with Rafalko is where he still has very weak muscles in the oblique muscle group around the thoracic sling and the muscles that adduct and abduct all four legs, which is how they get around a circle with a very straight spine, level back, engaged hindquarters. And his training, nobody told me except Rafalko. His body and the way he moved told me what I needed to know about his prior training. And it's still very traditional, very common to believe that the horse's midline or spine should bend like a banana on a circle, taking the shape of the circle, or during lateral work or any lateral bending, that the horse should be sort of internally shaped like a banana. And it's been disproven with scientific research on how the equine spine actually needs to function, but it's still the most prevalent belief out there. I think Deb and I just did a Horse Geeks podcast about straight on a circle and what that means. And because he was meant to move like a banana in his training and his back was pushed down, all of the muscles between the left and right hind legs and the muscles between the left and right front legs, the oblique muscle group that allows the legs to widen, adducting and abducting, are very tight and very weak, giving him a narrow, what they call a narrow base, or base narrow if it's a farrier. They call it base wide or base narrow, which especially on the front legs is much more of a muscular issue rather than a conformation point. So he couldn't bring his legs outward, and he couldn't get a broad base of support that would stabilize the hindquarters, right? So more distance between the left and right hind leg, and his front legs were very narrow, right? So he couldn't reach like he is now across. In order to track this size circle, he would have to drop his back and bend his spine or destabilize the rotation. So everything just went to crap when we tried to do turns or circles. He had zero steering. He was too fast and could not turn, right? So this is a big advancement for him, and the fact that he can do it in a halter in the groundwork is also a big advancement. He had no control on the long reins and could not walk this slow, could not keep his neck long for a very long time. So adduction basically just means that a leg is swinging inward in a slightly lateral direction while it's traveling forward. So the hind leg moving inward towards the center of the horse is what they do for engagement. Abduction just means that a leg is moving away from a midline. So if I do it with my right leg, adduction, abduction. And I think he just blocked the view. I know, because you're a big guy. So his advancement, and this is his physical therapy or his gym workout for his oblique muscle group, whether we're suppling chronically tight muscles or, in his case, building atrophied muscles, the reason we need those oblique muscles working is it's part of how they resist their own body weight falling forward to their own front legs, right? So we have to build up the stability of the hindquarter, right? The stability of the back. Internal straightness involves a straight alignment of the spine from pole to tail. And stable rotation is sort of dorsal tips upright through the spine. Because when a horse twists the spine, for us, this is rotation. And if we put that, there's the kitty photo bomber. If we put that on a horizontal plane for the horse's spine, rotation is what causes the back to roll side to side, the barrel to roll, and the hindquarter to sort of excessively tilt side to side. That's a weakness in the horse, right? It's a dysfunctional use of the spine. So now that he has basically stabilized that, developed the core muscles to support it, you can see he stays on his circle with a pretty lengthened neck, right? And this is the end of 30 minutes to the right. So I'm kind of catching the end of one direction. And when I change direction, where he's been muscularly the tightest and had the hardest time is abducting the left front leg. Very, very tight there, and the leg is even, he's a little pigeon-toed on that foot. So as I change direction, then we're going to start over. So changing direction, the reason I stay 30 minutes on one direction and then change the direction for an equal amount of time is because it takes time to warm up the body, work out tightness, find a new coordination that's also going to involve new muscle use, and get good at it. So changing speed for a horse is actually easier than changing direction. I guess that's true for humans too. If we're right-handed, it doesn't matter if we're walking or trotting or cantering, we're still right-handed, right? So if we want to be more balanced, we need to get handy with our left hand. Even though we're capable, we don't necessarily, our coordination doesn't involve using both hands equally or both sides of our body equally unless we actually focus on it, work on it, and develop it as a conscious skill. And that's true for horses as well, right? So what I'm doing is when because he would get very, very heavy on the left rein when we would track left, and I realized his oblique muscle groups still need more strength. So when he starts to fall forward, I'm timing the use of my outside rein to step the outside hind leg a little bit laterally into adduction. That causes the inside hind leg to abduct, widening the distance between the two hind legs, which helps with stabilizing the engagement. It's part of really using the hindquarters And you can see it's difficult for him, right? Part of the reason he pulls on the left rein so heavy when we go left is because the left front leg is very tight and doesn't like to abduct there. And he bent. So with his lengthened neck, sometimes he's a little bent to the outside of the circle as he loses hindquarter stability. And sometimes the pole is straight to the tail, and you can actually see with him in this exercise, or this version of the exercise, the lateral movement of the legs brings the straight and level torso and neck around the turn, right? So I use this exercise with him when he has a ground working day to help him loosen up the tightness around that left front leg by not disengaging his right hind when he's going left. That's what he tends to do. And then giving him time to figure out and loosen up the tightness, figure out how to abduct with that left front leg, just like that, until it starts to get comfortable, right? So there where he falls into long and low, he's also falling forward with more weight on the left front leg. So as I increase the lateral direction of the legs without bending, hopefully, then he starts to work the muscles that will help him control his own body weight, resist falling forward as he lengthens the muscles of the top line. Right? And this direction is quite hard for him. So I gave him 30 minutes the other way, which is a little bit his easier direction right now. And we may see, yeah, he may bite at it a lot. He may gape his mouth a little, even in the halter, when he's struggling. He may overcurl his neck even a little this direction. There's still some residual habit left in there. There, he just got very light on my hand because he supported himself for just a few strides. Then he gets heavy on my hand, so I kind of time my outside rein to the lift of the outside hind until he can figure out that his left front leg needs to reach more. So you can see, even though the nose is pointed to the outside, the hindquarters and the low back are tracking around the circle, right? And as he gets more strength in these oblique muscle groups, and as he starts to supple and strengthen the thoracic sling muscles, he will look straighter on the circle. He won't be walking sideways like he is now. But for now, like there where he falls into long and low, which is the posture I want for Prima right now, but he's already moved through that stage, right? So from long and low, we want long and level. And the levelness, like there with his neck, a little bit of extension there, a little bit of shortening and tightening. But the elevation of the long neck from long and low does not require that we use rein resistance. It does not require that we pick up the front end with our hands or use the reins. So in the long rein exercise, whether I have a heavy feel, a light feel, whether my timing is quick or slow, I'm always alternating the rein pressure between the left and right rein. So I'm never restricting where he wants to put his neck. Instead, when he falls into long and low, I know he lost the stability and the control and the resistance through the use of his back and hindquarter. So as I encourage a little bit more adduction and abduction through the legs, those are exactly the muscles he needs to resist falling forward, to resist his own body weight in motion. So that's about 10 minutes this direction. And I'll just show another 5 minutes of it, and then I'll keep working him on this direction for 30 minutes. And each time we have a groundwork session for whatever reason, if it's bad weather, if I don't have a lot of time, for him I can throw the halter on, grab the long reins, and even if I hadn't groomed him, he could go to work and this is his go to the gym workout. This is his Pilates class. This is his yoga class. This is physical change in the muscling through his body and in the use of his legs. But while he's still tracking a bit sideways or with an outside bend, I think it's a good example of seeing they don't have to bend the spine like a banana in order to track a circle. It feels a little bit more like a forward moving turn on the haunches, right? So as he lengthens his neck, I want long, but the evolution from long and low is long but not low, right? So basic balance is sort of a long neck with the pole more level to the back. The higher degree of balance after basic balance would be the same long neck, but the more the spine flexes upward, the more they lift the back, the more they correctly engage and use the hindquarters, they elevate the pole above the withers because the back is lifting, because the hindquarters are doing their job. So it's not something we do with our hands. Rain resistance can be part of an aid to help them figure that out, but it's not the only way to get there. So working on small circles where the legs have to adduct and abduct more, or working with transitions between halt, walk, trot, canter. Those are other ways to build up the lift of the spine, the engagement of the hindquarters, and sort of that front-back balance to the point that they can resist their own body weight during motion. That's what gets them out of long and low. So whenever he lengthens the neck but starts to bring the nose to the ground, I'm just increasing a little bit the lateral movement of really just the outside hind leg. The other four legs are figuring out what to do, right? So the right front adducts, crosses the midline. The left front should abduct just as much. It's a little restricted, a little tight for him, right? If I were riding the circle, the left hind leg would adduct towards the midline and the right hind leg would abduct. On the long reins, it's the opposite, but you're still working the same muscle group. So it has the same effect. It's just a different way of giving the aid. So the hindquarter adduction and abduction is a bit backwards, but the front legs are the same as if I were riding. Excellent. And then with him, he does some groundwork, very targeted muscle work, and riding. So when I do updates with him, I'll just show whatever we happen to be working on. But he's finally getting to a point of core strength that he has enough control to go slowly. He's learning to control his own body weight in motion. And the good news is, because of his navicular and ring bone, we can still achieve those ends even if we're restricted to working mostly at the walk. And under saddle, even if I'm restricted to not being able to use rein resistance at all because it triggers his old body pattern instantly and severely. So all of the time I've ridden him, it's had to be a very light rein because he came from a world where the reins were so heavy, he did not know how to balance himself anymore. He had no self-control if you didn't literally hold him up with rein pressure. So that's Rafalko. I don't think I'll add anything more. I'm going to continue working him, and we'll see how he does. He's another one, like I said, that I own, so we'll be able to see his progress without interruption. And in hindsight, I probably should have put my horses under the playlist called Case Studies, and I should have put Ozzy and the temporary horses under the playlist Wexford Training Barn, but I did it backwards. Oh well. We learn as we go. And I'm going to just finish up working him today. And then the next time I video him, maybe you will look at a bit of riding.